Gaza's streets are stirring. Small militias rise, not against Israel, but against Hamas itself. Tribal fighters, ex-security officers, a few hundred armed men trying to change the balance of power. Can tiny forces topple a giant? Or are they just sparks in a fire too fierce to control? In the rubble-strewn streets of Gaza, something unexpected is happening. Small armed groups are emerging, not to fight Israel, but to challenge Hamas itself. These aren't massive militias or well-funded organizations. They're local fighters, often no more than a few hundred strong, yet they represent something that hasn't been seen in Gaza for years: organized opposition to Hamas rule. Regional media outlets are taking notice, particularly in the Gulf states where the official position remains clear. Hamas cannot be part of Gaza's future.
Small armed groups are emerging in Gaza, but the crisis is much bigger. There is a local, regional, and international consensus in the Gaza Strip that Hamas cannot be part of any future solution for the Strip.
The first name to surface in this underground resistance was Yasser Abu Shabab, described by the Washington Post as a tribal strongman. Abu Shabab, backed by Israeli forces, has established a base in southeastern Gaza, an area under Israeli military control. He represents something the international community has been hoping for: a local alternative to Hamas leadership. But the story gets more complicated. Abu Shabab comes from a large Bedouin tribe, and his emergence hasn't been without controversy. Reports from the New Arab accused him of setting up what they called collaborator villages in southern Gaza. This raises a fundamental question that cuts to the heart of this entire phenomenon. Are these groups genuine alternatives to Hamas? Or are they simply Israeli proxies who will struggle for local legitimacy? The terminology itself reveals the challenge. Depending on who's speaking, these same fighters are described as collaborators, tribesmen, or anti-Hamas groups with wide appeal. The language used often reflects the political position of the speaker, making it difficult to assess their true support base and potential effectiveness. Now, a second group has emerged, led by Husam al-Astal in Khan Yunis, south of Gaza. Al-Astal's story reads like something from a spy novel. A former Palestinian security official, he was sentenced to death by Hamas for his alleged involvement in Israel's assassination of a Hamas official. At 50 years old, al-Astal brings a different background to the resistance movement.
I am 50 years old. I remember when the army and Israel were in Gaza, and we lived in peace.
Al-Astal's group has established itself around the village of Kizan al-Najjar, just south of Khan Yunis. Like Abu Shabab, al-Astal comes from a Bedouin family and worked in Israel for many years before joining Palestinian Authority security forces when they still controlled Gaza. Hamas accused him of involvement in an assassination attempt on Hamas-associated engineer Fadl al-Bach in Malaysia in 2018. Joe Truzman, writing in the Long War Journal, identified another group calling itself the Counterterrorism Strike Force. In their Facebook announcement on August 21st, the group declared,
"In response to the catastrophic conditions endured by our people in the Gaza Strip, and in light of the ongoing rule of repression and terrorism practiced by Hamas, we announced the formation of the Counterterrorism Strike Force."
After 14 days of fighting, after deploying up to 5 divisions against an estimated 20,000 to 30,000 Hamas fighters, the Israeli Defense Forces haven't been able to completely remove Hamas from power. If the IDF, with all its military might, hasn't achieved this goal, can a few hundred or even 2,000 local gunmen succeed where they have struggled? The numbers tell a stark story. Hamas maintains an estimated 2,500 armed fighters in Gaza City alone, according to current assessments. The anti-Hamas groups, by contrast, appear to number in the hundreds rather than thousands. Al-Astal's group, for instance, is reported to have only a few hundred men operating 1 kilometer outside the humanitarian area of Mawasi.
I am responsible for the new humanitarian zone in Khan Yunis.
But responsibility and actual control are two very different things in Gaza's complex reality. Al-Ain media noted that
while these groups present themselves as an alternative to Hamas, they have not received support locally or regionally. These groups cannot operate without direct or indirect support from Israel, which is likely to alienate the local population, especially given Israel's actions against the population of Gaza for nearly 2 years.
the historical precedent isn't encouraging either. The United States tried a similar strategy in Iraq during the 2000s, empowering Sunni tribes in what was called the Awakening Movement against insurgent groups. While initially successful, the strategy only worked for a short time before the tribal militias lost influence and effectiveness. Al-Ain's analysis cuts to the core of the problem.
Israel's refusal to allow the Palestinian Authority to return to the Gaza Strip, or the Arab proposal to have an independent Palestinian committee, assume responsibility for administering the Strip for a transitional period. After the war makes the chances of a solution increasingly difficult.
Reports of coordination between the Abu Shabab and al-Astal groups, they operate independently of each other. This fragmentation may actually weaken their collective impact rather than strengthen it.
Despite the growing number of anti-Hamas militias in Gaza, there is no clear evidence showing how effective they have been in countering the rule of the Islamist group.
Around 500,000 people were recently forced to evacuate Gaza City during the latest IDF offensive. Yet, Hamas continues to control the lives of approximately 2 million people in Gaza. These numbers show the enormous gap between the anti-Hamas group's current capabilities and the scale of control they would need to exercise to truly replace Hamas authority. The question that emerges isn't whether these groups represent hope for change. They clearly do for those seeking alternatives to Hamas rule. The question is whether hope alone, backed by limited numbers and contested legitimacy, can transform into the kind of sustained governance that 2 million people desperately need. So far, the evidence suggests these groups remain, as one analysis put it, a small drop in the bucket in the larger struggle for Gaza's future.